Hi, this is Matt Powers, and I'm going to start this meeting. The roll call is we have the town manager Clint Deschette who's here, and the police chief Dan Merrill, and Councillor Andrea Hardison, and then I'm Councillor Matt Powers, and we have the council chair Dan Demerit, and we also have at the moment our economic development manager or assistant town manager or whatever.
Yes.
Many roles. Mitch Stone is here, and we're probably going to have John Gordon hopefully in a little bit. All right, so I think what we wanted to start out with was just to continue our discussion on our ordinances relating to neighborhood noise, and one of the things we asked the chief is to give us kind of a little bit of an idea of what the last 5 years has been like in terms of how many calls he gets along these lines. Maybe even if there are particular hot spots. I don't know if you were able to get that or not, but within Orono, and we can then start the discussion off from there. Is there anything anyone that?
Well, I think Mitch has some data for us too, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Don't we have my numbers, and then you can talk as a registry and stuff, Mitch?
Sure.
So I actually would say that, what I had thought actually kind of got confirmed in the numbers like we talked about. I went from 2019 forward to this year to date this morning. And for the most part, they're trending downward. Noise complaints as a whole in general. So I'll give you just some general numbers in 2000. So to date, this year for 2024, I've had 109 reported noise complaints in town. So that's townwide. So I'm going to give you all of the town, and then I'll give you the ones that are relevant to Webster side. So 109 for all of the town of Orono, and 7 of those have been in the Webster side neighborhood.
You say 129?
109, 109. And 7 of those have been in the Webster side neighborhood. 2023, I found 140 noise complaints in the town, with 12 of them being in the Webster side. 2022 had 153 noise complaints, with 8 of them being in the Webster side.
That was 123?
153.
50. Sorry,
No, you're good.
I'll write faster.
With 8 in the Webster side for 2022. 2021 was 218. That was, I think, the high actually. 2021 was the high, 218 noise complaints. With 18 of them being in the Webster side.
That was COVID.
That was coming out
Right out, that was the back out of
Yeah.
COVID.
COVID actually surprised me too, because, yeah, that one was the one that surprised me, because it was coming out of COVID. Like 2020 was 210. That was the one that surprised me, because I still had 210 noise complaints for what was, almost 3/4 of that year was lockdown. And they were actual, like when I went through the ones, at least for the Webster side, they weren't necessarily ones that related to like any of the restrictions on people and gatherings and stuff like that. They were actually like people calling about neighbors being a little loud. And that wasn't just unique to the Webster side. I think that was unique for all of our noise.
Yeah, that makes sense though, a little bit, because everybody's at home getting all crazy.
Right. Well, I think more people were saying, oh, I think that there is a reflection in that.
And I drank more. I'm not gonna lie.
2019. So 2019 would have been 176 noise complaints in town, with 13 being in the Webster side.
How many were in the Webster side in 20?
10.
10?
Sounds right.
I wrote it.
I didn't hear.
10.
Okay.
Yep. 210 in 2020, with 10 being in the Webster side.
Interesting.
And then so off that, I figured I would look at how many of them how many of those numbers that we had in the Webster side per year were categorized as disorderly events or ones that our officers went to that they actually did a disorderly event sheet on. So for 2024. We've had one disorderly event so far, and we actually have one. That was. An incident in July where. As opposed to doing a disorderly event, we actually had to go back to a residence a second time and we actually ended up issuing a criminal summons. So the ordinance side and then the like criminal side, they can run parallel, but with that one, they opted to go with issuing the people a criminal summons. So that was one in July. So one disorderly event and one criminal summons in 2024. For 2023, we had two disorderly events. 2022 had two disorderly events.
This is townwide,
Nope, just in the Webster side.
thank you.
These ones are just in Webster side.
Yeah.
2021 was two disorderly events. 2020 was 0. And then 2019 had 4. There would be something worth noting too, and Mitch, you have to remind me on this. I think when I looked at it. With some of this data, we have to remember that I'm kind of operating under two separate sets of ordinances too. So we had the old ordinances that were in place until 21, that sound right? First half of 21?
Did we do something with a disorderly event in 20?
It was either 20 or 21, I can't remember when it was implemented, I don't see it, when I looked online this morning or this afternoon. I didn't see when it was ratified, but it's,
Yeah.
so right around COVID, I know we made an ordinance change or we reclassified how we were gonna do disorderly events. So the new way is disorderly event 1 and 2, which is based on the size of the party. So disorderly event 1 is a gathering of less than 20 people. A disorderly event 2 is any gathering more than 20 people. And before that, it was. Well, I have to go back and remember what it was. It was more steps.
Yeah.
There was a lot more steps that you had to go through to be classified as a disorderly event, as I remember. So part of going to this new ordinance was to consolidate the steps, reduce the amount of steps to get somebody into the system faster. As I remember it. That was kind of had a role change for me, but that's how I remember it. So. You guys have any questions about any of that?
None of those at 50 Hillside Road, I trust, right?
None of those were. I trust, actually, I knew. I may have seen somebody-
Brian.
I may have seen somebody's name once or twice on a couple of them, but, you know, like I said, as a whole. They kind of were trending down. But so I would say the hot spots. And this is not making a judgment on any of the complex, and on the complexes in town, based on just their density.
Mhm.
They carry the load of where the bulk majority of our noise complaints are.
The housing
When I'm the housing complexes, so Orchard Trail, the Avenue and the Reserve.
I mean, the nice thing. Yeah. It's more contained.
It is, which, you know, it's a give and
bad
take,
and
right?
good.
If you live in an apartment where you have
Yeah,
3
it's
roommates
really
and
hard.
you're on the top floor or the bottom floor,
That's true.
you know, you have that density that also. Lends itself, I think, to having more noise complaints, cause if you're the middle floor, you got
Yeah,
neighbors
that's
above you and neighbors below you. And there could be, you know, there's 3 other apartments on each floor, so if you're the middle floor, you.
That's tough.
Could have a rough go.
Is it, just, I don't know this, is it, can anyone live in those, can I go live in
Yeah.
the Avenue if I wanted to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, if they rent to anybody.
Yeah,
They're-
well, yeah, they promote too.
The reserve has, to my knowledge, has more of a mix.
Mhm.
I think it might have to do a little bit with their layout.
Yes.
But I have run
Is that the
into,
further?
that's the furthest one.
Yeah, yeah.
The Ave, which is the newest one and the biggest one, I have heard, a
That makes
lot of
sense.
young professionals. Living in the 1-bedroom or, they have, cause they have 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom efficiencies, 3 and 4 bedrooms. I think they might go up to 5, but I'm not positive there.
I don't know if they have a 5, I think it's 4.
I mean-
4, so they offer all of them. Orchard Trails, only 4 bedrooms.
Mhm.
And then, I think Reserve has like 3 and 4 bedrooms. So the options are different in every place. So there are a lot, I have run into several folks that have moved to the area that are young adults just out of college that have moved into the one or efficiencies because they're reasonably affordable in the area.
And what you get in the reserve and the avenue, like Mitch said, is you get more of a condo style living.
Yeah.
Where you have a vertical apartments, you only have one shared wall, as opposed to being sandwiched. You know, if you're in a three-story apartment complex like it is in Oak Trails.
I also, I mean.
But they have mixed everything, they have both,
It's
both
just
those complexes
great.
have both.
But you have more people there, so
Oh,
it just
yeah.
makes more sense,
Yeah.
it's more,
Yep.
3 people per square foot, so you're just gonna get more, I mean. Just like if you took the whole density
Yeah.
of people within
Yeah.
like the neighborhood, like
Yeah.
in the Webster Side neighborhood, you probably.
I don't think the Webster
It
side
would be any
has
different.
half the population of one of those complexes has,
Right,
you know.
right.
I mean, the avenue's 1,000.
So
think
what
the
I'm saying
average
is like,
$1,000,
you may find that per
you know.
person, it's got lower complaints than one of their
So-
neighborhoods else, or.
So the 100 I'm sorry. There is. I guess she didn't roll it out that way.
I was trying to figure out the number of units and I just saw it. It's like 800 units in the big three.
How do-
So all three together.
When you get complaints from there, or like, is it the people who are filing complaints from there, is it, do you find in general, it's kind of the same level of frustration, or do you find it less, more? I'm just curious, like, the complaints that come out of there, how,
I think it's, I think anecdotally from having read reports and just in my experience, I would say that. Noise is noise, right? And I think that when it starts to become frustrating to people is when it becomes an ongoing and consistent issue. So there are some times when you just have neighbors that aren't considerate. And it's harder to get, like I said, I think it's harder to get away in those
Yeah.
apartment complexes. Because the quietest place you can go to is your room. And you're still at the mercy of the construction of the building and what the other neighbors around you are doing. There's not really any place to go.
So I also would think about it as like a residence hall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
is that-
dorm living.
In a residence hall, when somebody's loud, you go to your RA. Right, and say, hey, these people are being loud, right?
Yeah.
There isn't that option, so if they talk to their neighbor. That's great, but the next step is,
Residents on site,
Staff, I mean,
yes.
Yeah.
stuff like
They
that.
have the office staff and they have somebody they think that's supposed to live in one of the buildings to be like available for lockouts and stuff.
Lockouts and
But they don't have like,
yeah.
you live in building 1, you live in building 2, it's not like an RD. You don't get like the RD like you do in a dorm.
Yeah.
But they do have people that are on call for lockouts.
I guess I'm dancing around, do you think our ordinances serve that community well enough? Does our ordinance, I guess, I don't know, I mean, since we're reviewing the ordinances and they're 2 very different communities,
How many disorderly calls have you had to the big three that only involve one apartment? I say that because,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
you know, when you
Yeah.
might show up because there's a whole bunch of people outside in the parking lot.
Yeah.
That,
Like, I mean,
well, and the hard thing too is. I might get 3 noise complaints in one of the big 3, but it's because there's 34 buildings inside of the
Right.
avenue. So it's not it's not a crazy thought to think that you get a noise complaint in building 2, a noise complaint in building 8, and a noise complaint in building 30. Is
But
that any different than getting 2 noise complaints on Pond Street?
Yeah, no,
Not really in my mind, a noise complaint's a noise complaint, I think that's what the ordinance addresses.
but when you go,
Right.
it seems to, okay. And I mean, you're not getting
It's a little
called back
easy-
multiple times,
No, and that's the thing that's.
you know,
So that was one thing that, one that was in July that we had was that one of the houses that's, I think, been brought up to you guys, it's on North Main Ave. That they didn't get the hint the first time, which is why we went the criminal route, like, we tried to be nice, we tried to get them to break it up. They basically didn't want to, so that was why we summoned them. And that's typically what we do, like, so our approach, and this is maybe a conversation that we need to have too in this committee is. If the council or this committee thinks that we need to retune the way that we, when I say we, I mean the police department. Go out and address noise complaints, and that's a conversation I think that we can have. But right now, the approach that we've always taken is, we go there and. We're trained, we know what a party looks like, right? I think we talked about this last time, like.
Sure.
If I went by the letter of the law, 20 people is not a ton of people, but you gotta put a number on it, right? So when we're going to a party, is it the 4th of July and it's people at 7 o'clock at night having a barbecue? Could there be 20 or 25? Any person, I'm not saying any group, any age, any group, any residents gathering on that holiday that would violate the ordinance? I think it's a reasonable conclusion to think that we might. So
That's.
the power that we've taken, the approach that we take in the police department is. Have we been here before? What are we dealing with? There's a difference between 20 and 200.
Yeah.
Right, like. If we go to a party that's 100 or 200, I hope my officers know enough, I know my officers know enough to go. This one we probably should do a disorderly event sheet on, so that we can try and do something with it. So. I think, like everything in our job, I think discretion and trusting what it is we're seeing is important to leverage this ordinance. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, it feels like discretion, judgment at the scene is important, and I can't imagine we want, I assume there's a lot of discretion. You could, different ends of the spectrum, right? And it could be an entirely different experience based on. You know, you start slapping, you know, looking for IDs for everybody there and underage drinking and things like that could really be a hard response. And I don't know that we want that. It doesn't feel like belonging to me. I mean, if you can, so it's kind of a.
And I think one of the other things I forgot to mention too, that we've been doing through the other ordinance and through the new version of the ordinance is. If we were to go to a place and it's found to be disorderly. We'll also leverage like Ed Lesky, our community police liaison, we'll have him go to them. Or if it's a place that I've seen where it seems like we've been there a time or two.
Yeah.
I'll ask Ed, hey, can you go talk to these people and try and remind them about being neighborly and stuff like that and see if we can. Use the carrot and stick approach to some degree, right? Like. We don't wanna have to put people in the system if we don't have to,
Right.
but ultimately, if we get there, we will.
You guys like, I'm just curious, and I don't even know if it's I mean, you guys would know whether it's effective or not. You guys like, can you hand out like. Do you hand out stuff to them too when you're like Ed Lesky, does he have like this thing, here's the ordinance type, like
So,
in like really
when-
small?
When they do rental registration,
Okay,
we send a form out with every rental registration that talks about, here are some of the rules that you may not expect that we would have, or things
Right.
like trash and those types of things are on that, and we send it goes to the landlord or the property manager, and we tell people to put it up. I will say that most of the landlords, the ones that have a lot of properties. They're finding, they're finding if somebody leaves a trash can out, they find them. I mean, we will call them and say, hey, is there any way you can take care of it? Yeah, I'll take care of it. And if they take care of it, they'll find $50. They have, a lot of them have a full fine system trying to take care of a lot of that. And that's the big ones. That's the ones that, and we're talking about a lot of these folks that have properties in Webster side, but all over that are, they don't. If the police goes to their house and they find out about it, they will find them. Because they don't want that, I mean, they don't want that, you know, and I think that's the hard part with this is that they're trying as well, but they're not there, so it's, you know, that's hard. But I think the other thing that, as we go through this data, you're gonna find that. Things have gotten better. Because the data shows with the rental registration data shows it did exactly what we thought it should do, which was moving people in different places. And you're gonna see that you went from less single family home rentals to the big three. And so we have greater density in certain places, but we have less rental properties as a whole. So that shift that they were looking for and why they did it actually happened. And we have less rental properties, we just have more units because we've shifted where that goes, which is good. You also see that, you know, like I said, that with that, it's moved out. I mean, I don't wanna,
Your noise complaints, are those like resident noise complaints, or does that include like the walkers coming through the neighborhood?
So that's everything, so that's what, like, I took some notes on these for some of them, what they were. When I searched our database, it was, you know. All type noise complaints, so it could be the walkers, it could be, there were some of them, you know, there's anecdotally 2 or 3 of these maybe in those neighborhood ones where they're. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, main day, like 2 o'clock in the afternoon on main day, or. Not saying that that's a thing, 2 o'clock in the afternoon on main day, or, you know, even the early evening hours on Friday, Saturday night, 6, 7, 8 o'clock, where neighbors like, they're kind of being loud and we just go there. And those are the ones too, where at 7 o'clock at night, we would prefer to just go there and be like, hey, a neighbor's called, can you guys either turn in or can you just quiet it down a little bit because it's starting to get a little late in night. And technically, the ordinance wouldn't say that really even 7 o'clock is a thing because it's not 11, after 11, so.
It's 11 when it kicks in.
Typically, and I would say again, so we always go there with 2 lenses on, I would say our officers primarily usually go there with a. Criminal lens, and then the ordinance lens comes in after, that would be something where like, our supervisors and I would be like. Hey, let's do a disorderly event, or this is a disorderly event, and they would do it, or typically go in there just to solve the problem, we're problem solvers. At the core, we just want the noise to stop, because we know if the noise stops, the complaint's gonna go away, everybody's gonna be happy, and we go back to our job.
Yeah.
That's what we want, you know, ultimately. And again, I think that what it shows by not having. A big number of. Repeat calls, so there's a disconnect we've talked about. If people are having issues that continue after we leave and they don't call, we fix that problem. So that is to some degree a fundamental issue too. In that if the noise continues. Call back. Probably issue them summons, because we have done that.
A criminal summons or a disorderly?
A criminal summons, like I said, when we go there,
What's the criminality of that?
so it would be disorderly conduct, just unreasonable noise affecting somebody. So with that, that's where 99% of those would be at night, right? You wouldn't typically get a disorderly event at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Because the expectation of noise is much higher, right? But at 2 o'clock in the morning, when, 2 o'clock in the morning, even on a Friday and Saturday. Most of the general population is probably sleeping and, you know, a judge and a jury could find that that's not reasonable to have 200 people. With, you know, your 12-inch subwoofers outside your house blasting through the neighborhood.
so Dan, can you differentiate when you talk about the criminal side and the ordinance side? When you go to some place. You obviously look at the criminal side and you might do a criminal summons. The disorderly property isn't something that you go in and you're like, I'm gonna get you for a disorderly property. That's something you guys look at that event and then will reach out to them and say, you have a disorderly event if you go back twice. So it's not like a speeding ticket, you get pulled over, there's a ticket. This is more like they take that, correct me if I'm wrong, they take that event, they look at it and they say, yep, this, and that would be a. Not only did we do this, but we go back after you get a letter that says you've had a disorderly event. And then it gets filed, so that's not at the moment, because frankly, probably at the moment. They're not even gonna have any idea what.
And that's why we tend to circle back with Ed.
Yeah.
So we'll have Ed come back at 10, 11 o'clock in the day. When people probably have their faculties about them a little bit more. They don't have as much of the, you know. Friends and bravado and need to put on a show to people, you kind of just get to have real talk with people, right? Like, hey. You're having this effect, there are rules in place, you need to be neighborly, and that. Ed's very good at having a calm, fatherly conversation with people. He's always done that, and I think that, you know. People in general listen. Because he comes across as very honest and, you know.
Right, but that's when you would come back with a disorderly,
Yes.
you would explain this was a
And the
disorderly
language would be
event.
provided.
And here's the notification and here it is in writing, so it's, like I said, it's not like they get a.
It's kind of
disorderly
like
event ticket that night, it's
Right.
kind of a follow-up to.
So it's kind of like when John Belushi got put on probation or double secret probation, right?
Right.
Kind of that
Yes.
kind of thing. And so they're on notice that, all right, we're watching this house, we had a problem, now we're watching it.
Yeah.
And it lasts for a year. That was last one?
180 days.
Yeah.
So that's the catch too. So a disorderly event one. I'm pretty sure you, if I remember correctly, it was, I think you could have three disorderly ones.
We're in 180 days.
And then if you're a disorderly two, I know it was one event automatically triggers you.
It's hard to, it's hard to communicate complexity. And in terms of, as a tool for people, and, you know, I think a lot of times it's visitors who aren't necessarily residents too, on top of that, right? In terms of people walking down from somewhere else, and hey, there's this a hub of activity and whatever it may be, so it strikes me that the challenge is, I mean, it's good that the numbers aren't that high, but at the same time, I think there's some things, I guess I wonder how many things aren't going reported that could, you know, how neighbors are, I get the sense that, people aren't really, you're gonna have to pick up the phone and call and file complaints and stuff like that. Of course, we don't have. We're a complaint-driven process, right? So you're not patrolling in the Webster side, and maybe it's something we gotta look at in terms of, for like main day and things like that. Are there times maybe in the fall, and think we can ramp up enforcement or a presence or something like that to show the neighborhood that, you know, we take these things seriously, but.
Or is there an opportunity, especially in the fall, cause everything turns over, right? You've got, no matter what it is, you might have some people that are in the same house, but for the most part, most of these are at least new people in each thing. Is there a way to educate people? Is there a way to be proactive on the education side that just starts to be like, hey, we're in a neighborhood and, you know, some more of that kind of the beginning, because I think what end up happening is it settles down because lots of reasons.
Yeah.
You know, people run out of money.
Yeah, and
Right
it's-
now.
Yeah, it snows, it's
Yeah.
cold, it's, you know.
Away games,
Yeah,
you know?
whatever it may be, but I think they settle in, and then where you see that challenge, and the beauty for us is that that window is not very big in the spring. You know, it's just not a lot that you can
You have them by month.
I don't have them by month. I can get that for you.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
Because one of the things you get the one in July, I mean.
Yeah.
They move back in August. Or.
I don't think they ever went home.
So the
No, but were they staying here for the summer because it was
Oh.
the last hurrah before they moved away and then they took off and that was never their home again? Or are they still living there?
Right, they're still living there because they're tied to the university. Or something.
So,
Or something? Okay, that's just,
Yeah.
but I mean, again, some students would move away at some
Yes,
point.
yeah.
Whether year 1 or 4 or 8, depending on their plan.
I see the opportunity for education both for people coming in. You know, the students coming in and the turnover in the fall, and I hope that we can make something work for that, but I also see an opportunity for education for people in these neighborhoods who don't know that maybe if I call once and it doesn't go away, not to give up, right? Because I could see an opportunity where I could see my wife being that kind of person, well, I already called and nothing happened, you know, instead of being like, okay, if we really wanna see this solved, you have to have that second call, and there could be an education opportunity for residents, just to know that you're not putting, this is, you know, you guys are professionals, this is what you do for a living, you're not putting people out of, you know, out of bed, and if it hasn't worked once, make sure you call again and things can escalate. But I do think that there is an education component to it, because I don't know how many residents in your neighborhood or my neighborhood know that persistence.
Well, and
They
I
solve
think,
problems faster than having it be waiting 2 weeks, having it happen again and getting annoyed.
and I don't think those are two different educational opportunities. I think that's walking through the neighborhood and talking to everybody.
Yeah.
Hey, we're in a neighborhood and these are things, and remember, even if you live in one of these you don't like that your neighbor's a loud call, right? You know, I mean, it doesn't have to be
Right.
family, student, it could just be like, hey, this is a dense area, we got lots of people here.
Were there many calls for noise on the college Ave or where Orono residents live? But they're very close to the university.
College Ave?
Yeah,
Not
no,
a
the
ton.
ones, the neighborhoods on the river.
Yeah, no, not a ton.
Okay.
No, I,
Cause they play a lot of music there.
Yeah.
An observation.
No.
Noise complaints on
We
music.
did it across the river,
Yeah,
yeah.
Do
Benny
you
Road,
get
you know,
a- do you get a lot of
Yeah.
benefit calls on that?
not a lot, but I mean, I lived on Forest Ave and I could hear
No,
Friday night, you could hear stuff coming
That's
across.
my ear.
I would say,
It's just echoes.
sometimes I get invited to the Buckety Bucks on Winter Haven
Yeah.
houses and stuff,
Wow.
you can hear it. Yeah. My friends are friends, it's not, you know, it's not just because of this stuff, it's just.
no, I would say, if I was taking an educated guess, having looked at all of them. Probably conservatively 75% of them come from the big three, the big three complex.
Yeah.
And then the other 25% is just 65 Main Street, 130 College Ave, 11 Pond, just sporadic throughout town. I mean, again, noise complaints, I didn't even consolidate them down to time of day. Like, these aren't even just nighttime ones. This could be a loud truck out of Gould's Landing or somebody's generator, you know, I didn't parcel out any of those numbers. I just went all type noise complaints. All hours of the day, so.
Mitch, who had some data, was there?
Yeah,
anything
I
on that?
can-
I'd like to hear some like data or. Okay.
Yeah, 4 o'clock hard stop, right?
Yeah, or it's not at 4.
As much for staff as every bus too.
So, I pulled some data,
Just one sheet each or the 2 sheets?
they're all stapled
All
together,
stapled,
so one,
great.
yeah, there's 3 there,
I forgot to have my glasses.
sorry.
No, it's all good. No, I can appreciate it. I just have to be.
Oh, right?
I was trying to get on there, but here's what I've given you, so. We pulled rental registration, our rental registration list, and basically there's a number of different categories you do, but. As we talked through things, one of the things that kept coming to mind was the idea of things that were out of place, so grandfathered properties.
Okay.
This is a list of all grandfathered properties in town, there's 40 of them, which. Does not seem like a
that many.
ton, okay? On the edge of it, when you look on this side of it, it will tell you why it is. Why it is grandfathered, either unrelated, meaning they have more than the number, they've been grandfathered that, or the number of units. Those are 2 reasons. The second on the back,
Only non-conforming?
this one is only non-conforming, okay? The back, the one on the back of that has some numbers on it, this is totality, this is all of our properties. So these numbers are all our properties.
So nothing on Hamlin is, nothing on Hamlin is grandfather, I was just curious, it got a pretty big,
Nope,
okay, so that's in a different area then.
nope, so all of these here are the ones that we have listed as grandfather. Okay, and you look in the middle here, there's 40
Or maybe
properties,
Mayo, maybe it's Mayo, that's why.
there are 40 properties, 7 of them are for units, 33 are unrelated, and 1 is for an ADU, which.
Just between a unit and an unrelated.
So unrelated is about people, number of units is about, like, I have a
6
a
units.
6-unit building and I'm only allowed 2 in that.
So would an unrelated be a home occupancy apartment?
Unrelated is number of people, only 3 are allowed, but in some 5 are allowed. Okay, so that's the difference, it's number of people that you can have in the unit.
Never 12.
Of the 40, 33 are for this, 7 are for this.
Yes, these are only rental properties, so I just
Okay,
wanted
this
to
makes
be clear on that
sense.
too. The number of rental properties is 353. And then, you know, they took out the big 3 and they did some other things. The other one that I just kind of put in there, because I know we've had some conversations about housing, that 355 of the units are subsidized in some way. Which is 19% of the rental units. There are probably, I can count on my hand, 6. Like properties,
average?
6 other, what's the average? So the average.
State average of subsidized to.
I think I looked nationally and they were around 5%. If we were to take 5% of all units, if we were to take all of our units, we'd probably need about 8%. So
8,
8. So we're a little bit higher than the national average with the subsidy. We do have some homes that are, you know, affordable home units or things like that. There are not very many, probably like 3 or 4 of those.
Is this like, does this include like the Tom or wood?
Yep.
Thing?
Yep. So, and probably our biggest portion of that are somewhat age restricted, so for 60 and over type of, so. And then it just kind of goes down and tells you how many single family, how many 2-family, how many multifamily ADUs, and single rooms. So if somebody rents out 1 room,
ADU dwelling in, sorry.
that's a accessory dwelling unit, like the in-law apartment.
Michael, yeah.
Yeah, type of idea. The last page, which I talked to Isabel right before I came up here, and she cut and pasted stuff from that she did from the comp plan. Just don't try to match these numbers up because these are numbers that were done previously. But what this, if, I'm not gonna read through the whole thing, but what it basically tells you is that the number of rental units is down, total units is down, total properties is down. We got rid of a lot of the single family have been reclaimed because the big 3, so we have bigger density in those areas. So we have more units, but they're all in one place and we've lost the properties. So we have less properties, more units, which is what the idea was by changing the ordinance, giving the density to allow the big 3. Just FYI, that density no longer exists. After the big 3 were built, they changed the ordinance again to go more for a cluster development, which doesn't allow the amount of density that those big 3 have. So that those are no longer. But the idea was, we felt that was the right number at the time, right? Those
That
3
makes
would-
them non-conforming in that,
So you can't build them anymore, so yes, theoretically, it's non-conforming, but
allowed, but no more to be built.
yeah, yeah. So,
Change that ordinance if we wanted to, right?
Well, it's just, I would love to hear the rationale sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a curious approach to how to,
well, so
I mean, I know there's infrastructure, there's capacity, there's needs, but you allow 3 to build, and so now we're max. Would
They
make more
did-
sense to say, we're gonna allow, I mean, like communities can do, we're only gonna allow so many of this type of business in our community. That is an allowable land use regulation to limit the number.
Yeah.
As long as you have a rational basis.
So
Ours could be that there's just not enough infrastructure, so we're limiting it to 3 in that zone, and we've got them.
I don't believe they had an intention on limiting. I think what happened was, 1 got built, another 1 got built, the 3rd one got built, it got crazy. People went, oh my god, it's crazy, we gotta do something, we don't want that anymore, we're gonna change the density.
Sounds
Like, we didn't know what we were getting into type of thing, but the rationale behind it was trying to pull people out of the neighborhoods. And put them in a more dense area, especially the student rental type of stuff, and make that happen, and. Anecdotally, and I mean, it tells you it worked, right? If we did pull it out, we did reclaim a significant, I think it's like 153. Houses or something like that we, if I'm remembering correctly. She's got a lot of numbers in here, so.
They're reclaimed by.
Yeah. You know,
One of the things I
so,
like about her the most.
Yeah.
She's got the data, yeah.
so that really worked well from the rental registration. Now, understand, rental registration, there is no, they report, we require them to report, and it's $25 per unit, so there is a fee. But that's really just to run the program. I mean, we have somebody that has to take all this in and take that. It was never, that was not intended to be a punitive, and was very delicately discussed, because a lot of the landlords were not excited about a rental registration. Because they felt it was a slippery slope. And so the idea behind it was, it's data, it's information, so we know what's going on. So one of the things that we did change recently was the local agent. Anybody that owns a property that lives over an hour away has to have a local agent. And what we have found is those that have people, either owners or local agents or people that live there, are better properties. Where you struggle and where we've seen some of the struggle in the past is folks that buy a home for their child. rent it to two other people, and then there's no one there, they do whatever they want, and the kid, I own the house, but. In order for them to own the house, they have to be on the deed, which a lot of parents are a little skeptical about putting their child on the deed of a property, so you don't see that very often. So a lot of them end up having to get a local agent, and we have some property managers that will do that, some won't touch them.
I like this in the terms that it sounds like we're getting lower. Slowly, maybe there's a trend, but causation. Correlation is not necessarily causation from a science background, but we're seeing, so we have a change in the way that we've done rentals by having these big units. Over there. And even despite that, with those big density properties, and then also this change of probably how people can own their rental properties, we're seeing the number of rental properties go down. We're also seeing slowly maybe dipping in ordinance or in noise complaints, right? Maybe as a confluence of both of those things, I'd be interested to see like next year.
Well, and
This
I
is
would,
something that I
I
think
would
is
say
interesting to,
in the correlation areas, if you're removing the number of people renting.
right?
Probably means you have more of the families and people moving in, and
We
so.
reclaim
you-
houses. right?
You start to. People start to recognize that they're not around a whole bunch of people that are like them now, I mean, and you've really started to limit. And I think anecdotally, you've heard this, oh, it's all the big houses, well, of course it is, cause those are the ones that are rentals, cause it's hard to take a 6-unit and turn it into a single family home. Right, those are probably not gonna happen, so it makes sense that they're that way, how do we work with them? And those are gonna be your non-conforming or grandfathered properties.
Anything else, Dan, thinking of?
And there's nothing. Grandfather's grandfather, right? Is that, it's odd term, we think about how that term came to be, but I mean. Legally, there's nothing, or from an ordinance perspective or zoning perspective, there's very little you can do with something's becomes a taking, right?
You can do it through eminent domain and takings, that if the town wants to make that a responsibility, you go through and say, we are bringing the property back, and here's the. Go through fair market assessments and you,
Right, but
Give
check
them the
the
money,
difference between.
you take the house back and then you do it, I mean, I'm exploring other opportunities for. To incentivize returning them,
Yeah,
and what we can do as a town, we can be careful, anything that incentivizes that. Has to be tied to property taxes, and if it's tied to property taxes, it has to be consistent with state statute and constitution, which means we're probably meaning legislation. So we're dabbling on the edges of this a little bit, just trying to see what the unique opportunities we can develop. Like, LPC might be a place as when you're going down there to throw this idea saying, we have homestead exemptions for tons of other things. Why isn't there the non-conforming homestead exemption? What, meaning you're willing to buy a house that is going to be returned to being a homestead because it's currently non-conforming. In return for that, you get a 10-year bonus on your homestead exemption equal to 50% of your purchase price. That's the limited time you can do something like that. It's legal, but it requires state action.
Yeah.
And then towns would have to adopt them by local ordinances, like some of the senior. Again, senior, I think is one of the worst terms they could do, but people that are aging have other opportunities of people that aren't for their homesteads. They have to be adopted at the local level. And again, as you discussed the recent council meeting, that then takes it has the feeling of that assessed value that is not being taxed to them. That difference in non-paid taxes is made up from all the other non-exempt property taxes.
Yeah.
So it does shift, for lack of a better term, that off to another organization. If it's not state reimbursed.
Yeah.
State has chosen not to reimburse homesteads at 100% for a while now.
And the other thing about grandfather properties is they have to maintain that status, they have to continue to do the use. So if I was grandfathered to have 5 unrelated as opposed to the 3 in any zone, if I ever drop down to the 3, I lose my grandfather. So if I
Not
only-
because of vacancy,
Yeah,
but because of actual
right,
operation.
because you decide to do that. If I change something, so I say, oh gee, I wanna make this big, this building a 2-unit. So what that would do is it would change that occupancy to go from, actually it would go to 2 units, which they could do. You can have no more than an MDR, you can have one one building but 2 units in. If you change that, then that would allow for 3 unrelated in each, so actually you could get more people in there. But typically, you change the space, which is hard unless you had a big building to do that.
Yeah.
But it would change, you would no longer, it's not like you get 5 each, you know, you could go to 10, so any of those things, we've had a number of properties that. People will pull up, if you pull a permit that says, I'm gonna turn it back into a single family home, the grandfather's gone, you can't go back.
As he says that, it came, you say that, Mitch, one thing that came up today that's came up, and the other 2 times this has come up with the public. Was reporting, and you mentioned it, Dan, early, that, well, I don't wanna call the police.
Yep.
Again, that's an unfortunate reaction, but again, it does invite that anecdotal conversation, but one of the things is that, well, I don't think it's a police matter. I think they're being noisy and I'm upset, but I don't need instantaneous reaction. Is that the piece that's missing? Would that be a fix if there was a way to report
Maybe.
the incident that would eventually end up with the police department?
How do they
They would-
investigate, how do they investigate something?
They wouldn't.
Yeah.
It would just be a database of number of times, so you,
But
it's almost like, you know.
it could be an Ed Lesky too.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
that's like-
It could be a,
Hey,
hey,
I had 3 calls this weekend, no one wanted to report to the police, thank your neighbors, by the way, they thought you were noisy.
Yeah.
And that could lead to that unofficial, I don't wanna call it unofficial, but a less legal.
Non-emergency.
yeah,
Non-emergency.
So it's almost like the ways you can downvote something on social media or, you know, like not, or, you know, like
Yeah.
report the content and.
Yeah, I like
You
that.
know, a lot of times when I'm looking at Matt's Facebook page, there's stuff that they ask me if I really wanna see it because it's got sensitive content.
And it allows the staff to administer in a way that's different too, what
Yeah.
if, so you get 50 reports in a month on one house. From 10 different people, for different occasions.
Yeah.
You know, there's data that would allow Ed not only to visit them,
Yeah.
us to call the landlord.
Right.
Saying, you got a growing problem here, and we're gonna end up coming in, when we show up. And you could actually amend an ordinance to say, excessive. History could lead to an automatic second violation step. In history, we would have data then to say, look, we've had 50 complaints in a month. None of them official complaints, but going through our concerned residents complaint system.
Yeah, anytime we can have a system where we can automatically. Take these complaints and then make a database out of it and a system that goes automatically, I think is probably gonna be the future. Me personally, in all towns and all, and I know they're already out there.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's just the way to make life better, me personally.
But my question to you is,
I
will
don't
this
know.
answer some of the issues?
I
Is
don't
that
know.
one of the things
Then
residents?
what does it do about, so this is fascinating. What does it do about the people walking from to a house in Webster?
Pin it. I'm walking by, it's noisy, boom, I'm here, click.
oh, he's saying people walking down the street where they're loud.
General noise.
We'll solve it.
You could do it,
Yeah.
you could do
There
it.
was multiple
But
people
that
and we
might
were saying.
open the door
The
to
vagrant.
time ranges when there needs to
Disorder.
be more of a patrol. in a
That
certain
could
area.
be, you know, crowdsourcing, kind of like
Yeah.
reporting,
Mhm.
and if we had, it's gotta be an app for that, right? We
Oh, yeah.
pin it, and like, hey, I'm on Hillside right now, and I'm happy,
11
I'm at
minutes later,
48.
it's at this location, we're like, we know where, okay, they're walking towards.
Yeah.
They're walking towards.
They're walking towards the railroad.
They're walking towards.
Why we
Rolling down.
Under the bridge.
I think that's innovative, yeah.
I think that's all great, I think the
Yeah.
one thing you have to remember is with that, and if there's no.
You have to set people's expectations to know you're
Yeah.
not gonna see me.
Right,
But like,
and
again, you mean what I mean.
and with no follow-up, how do I know what that was?
Right.
So my neighbors just, we don't get along,
Yeah,
and they put in there 20 times that the dog's loud.
If it's real time, it'd be viewed in real time, right, doesn't mean you know what I mean, like the calls come in, you guys watch what you do, but it's also something like that could be set up that it goes to the patrol email. So that they're aware.
Or, yeah.
It's Sam
We
time,
set
they
it up.
see it's, whoa, okay, we got,
We set it up.
something's going on.
I think too, if you have one person that's consistently reporting about another person, that's.
I think that's what it is, you have to be able to decipher that information.
But again.
You pull up the East German judge, the score from the East German
I
judge.
think like all systems, if it's done well, it's probably gonna solve problems, and if it's done poorly, it's gonna create a lot of problems, because if you don't have feedback going back to the people who complained. They know that something has happened, then it's just gonna be an issue. like all things.
I've
But
reported
one
it
thing,
20 times and I haven't seen anything.
one thing. I love Orono, I love the way it is, and I don't know how many rentals is too many and how many is too few. The one thing I do know is I want it to be a college town. Which means it will have rentals at some part, and I don't wanna change that completely, but that's just me. But I also want it to be a place that's happy for everybody, for families with small kids. I have kids. And any way we can make it easier for everybody, including the police, less complaints somehow. However, we can figure that out, I'd like to do that. We have 10 minutes.
Well, one thing I would say about that, and this
Yeah.
kind of shifts in the idea of the comprehensive plan is,
Mhm.
that's where zoning comes into
Yeah.
play, right? The reason
Yeah.
realistically, the big three are high density.
Right,
There's some other high density properties. If you had, you had those zones that were kind of zoned that way and people understood this is what it is. What's hard is when you have medium density and that feels like a neighborhood. But yet everything's medium density. When I move in there, it's medium density, but then there's a lot of these here, right? Because they've been grandfathered. I think that's where it is. That is an option when you look at these, are there better places or targeted areas, just like you end up doing with the big three,
Mhm.
to say, this is where we would expect a lot of those rentals to be because their proximity to this or they make sense here, right? Near the downtown, it makes sense to have higher density because you can walk and you can do that thing, you don't need to, things like that. So those are other options that you can look at, when you walk through this, that's how all of these came to play was through the comprehensive plan.
Yeah.
Right, so when we get to that, I think that's something that if you are really thinking about those things, are there ways that you can look to use zoning to shape where, and I mean, that's what it does. Where do you want your growth to be? Where do you want, you put those things in play to attract the type of development or type of use that you're looking for.
sure, and we know that we have issues with affordable housing and taking too many rentals out of that. I don't know whether that will help or make it worse. There's some, but anyways,
So next time,
Yeah.
talk about, so
Yeah,
next
keep
time,
building.
meeting, we got another meeting of the month, next time,
yeah,
I think talk about. Well, our charge is to kind of report on the data
Mhm.
and the ordinances and maybe for next time we start thinking through. A little bit of the innovation that could go along with the
Yeah.
ordinances, so it
Yeah.
feels like there's an education piece here that we can move on, and we're gonna talk about events and things like that, welcoming people to Orono. The block parties and stuff like that, enforcement is obviously part of it, and it feels like we get the right approach and
Yeah.
maybe. Like beefing up enforcement is part of education and then really finding opportunities to tag those if the places that are a persistent problem. You gotta the law's gotta get a little tougher, and with the support if we go that way, with the support of the council. And then innovation, because there's gotta be some way to get data and input. That helps us understand where we have challenges and where we can be better.
This is a tough one because it's on the edge of a police matter. That's the only one, that's the challenge we're gonna have to
Right.
figure.
Yeah.
How do we innovate in a way that says, if you want a response, you gotta call police department. This isn't, if it's, 10:30, 12:30 on a whatever night and you can't sleep and something bad's going on next door. You're supposed to call the police.
Call please.
But if it's, and it may get us to filter out of these complaints. If it's more of a situation of and I can't remember the examples you used, but that you've got a loud generator next door.
Yeah.
That's not criminal activity. And that loud generator should be reported through here, and we'll go address the loud generator. That's right.
That's almost pat.
Yeah, it's almost a pat issue. Yeah.
That's a code issue, not a
Yeah.
police
It
issue.
only runs with the power.
yeah. So,
And it's super quick
Yeah.
because the power's up.
yeah, that seems good. We can. I'm interested in putting maybe having an education component part. put into, like heavily put into a Orono type days festival that would happen in the fall. I'm just throwing this out
No, I
right
love
now. But I would, but this is just the salvo because we only have 5 minutes and I think we should have an in-depth conversation of what that would look like. Is it feasible? What the festival would be like and how we educate the whole group, right, Mitch? Like both the citizens and new college students coming in, and can we do it as part of an event, although that won't be all of it. And I do think that we should, and I would be happy to staff a table, an Orono town table at the university in the fall, this coming fall, with information and like, this is how you vote and do, and like, let's have this table out here with, this is your town, come be a part of it, that as a start, because it won't be just one thing, obviously, but
This was a 10-minute conversation we were gonna have, right?
this was, but
Yeah.
now we only have 5 minutes.
Yeah.
I think
I like that idea. And I think too, there are probably some university events that could even open the door to even more connection with the students.
yeah, I think we need more tables there, and I'm willing to volunteer as part of that with some guidance from people who work in the town. So that I'm not giving people misinformation, but that they don't have to spend their time doing it. Cause I like the students, I like being there, I want them to know about it, and I feel like I could be a representative to the town, being like, hey, here's stuff, have some candy, and here's how you be a good student. And this is how you be a good neighbor.
I like the, I think of these things, we talk about
Yeah.
shifting to the events, not just the the ordinance piece of it, but the 10-minute part of the conversation.
Yeah.
When I knocked on doors in Orono, I had to talk to
Yeah.
people, Linda Doherty, you told me, just big brownies to like the housing, the student housing, they moved in the fall, said hello, meet you change your cell phone numbers, right? You get phone numbers and things like that. And I think about what can we do, and this is part of the same thing you're trying with the Orono Stops conversations, is recognizing we're a transient community that welcomes so many new people to our community every fall, particularly young. I think about how do we put this engagement on light speeds. It would typically take years for people to figure out. We try to do it in a weekend by the block parties and things like that, because that's, here you are, we're in Orono, and here's welcome, we'll drill you here. But these are things you need to know about what it takes to be and we had, I think the Orono Day, and that's one of our goals that we'll vote on Monday. I think we're gonna have a new communications, we're gonna see the contract for the new communications person or the engagement person in our package to put them around to us today. We're gonna have some additional capacity, and I think we've got a strong culture of, we love community events at this council. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity for us, and they want us to do it at the school. I mean, the school, people working in enrollment and student affairs, they want stronger town down and neighbor to neighbor. I want people to feel like Orono's home.
It solves problems for them too.
Yeah. So at the next meeting, you want to block out
Yes.
both those items, because we're gonna have it as a, kind of talk about that. I mean, I'm not prepared to suggest any dramatic ordinance change based on what we've heard.
Me neither.
But
So are you talking about this next meeting or the next council meeting?
no, the next
Yeah.
community development,
So we'll,
because we'll get charged with the Orono Days stuff, the Orono Festival. And if the three of us, if we can get one more person to vote with us, we can get $100,000 to do it.
Yeah.
Stretch the law.
yeah.
Just kidding, Leo.
So, yeah, that, the Orono Festival and we're not talking about zoning. Was there anything, sorry, say that one more, because I did not write the first thing you said down.
Oh, like I don't feel like there's a call for a big ordinance, I think maybe a report on it or something, but.
Yeah.
Okay. It feels like we have the tools
Mhm.
that we need, the
It's just
staff
more-
has the tools
yeah.
that they need to address. And until we're ready to say our expectation of anytime you show up and there's a suspicion of underage drinking, you hammer everybody you know, call it Old Town and BZ and we'll just, you know, we're not gonna do that, right?
Yeah.
I don't think anybody wants to do that.
This is more about the innovation and education component of it, I think. I mean,
We're gonna trust the police.
oh, absolutely, because you
Do
guys
the-
have to make those calls, like, I don't want you guys bringing the hammer down on a.
Sometimes you got it, right?
I mean,
But-
sometimes you have to, but like on a,
Yeah,
you know, at 7 o'clock for Fourth of July because of.
I feel very confident.
Loudness.
Yes, I feel very confident the entire time I've been here that it was said to me a long time ago, you know. You'll know it when you see it and think that we got a pretty good gauge of, you know, we know it when we see it, it stands out, you know. Notice complaints, they're not all the same.
Yeah.
But the big ones are. People pour out from all over the place,
Yeah,
create lots of problems.
I'm surprised that you, I don't know if you got it anyways. All right, thank you guys, we're done.
Great, good
Is
meeting.
that it? Good meeting?
Yeah, Tom.